Hi, I'm Bailey from Midnight Mama Sleep Consulting. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about awake windows. Awake windows are a really popular thing now that sleep training is a thing and we are learning more about pediatric sleep all the time. And awake windows are a really good thing to follow with your child as they get older. So what an awake window is the awake time in between rest periods for your child. So they wake up from the night, they have an awake period, then they nap, have another awake period, then they might nap again, and they'll have a final awake period, and then they're down for the night. So that's a 2-nap schedule, but if your child naps more frequently than that, then they'll have more awake periods throughout the day. So a good awake time kind of cheat sheet would be when you have a newborn, any baby from 0 to 12 weeks old, their awake time is really small. And it's often for newborns to kind of want to stay up later in the day. So they're taking lots of cat naps or sometimes lots of longer naps throughout the day. So their awake period should only be 45 to 75 minutes. So when you have a brand new, fresh newborn, they should only be awake for 45 minutes at a time. Once we cross the border of that 45-minute mark, then we're reaching overtiredness, which becomes harder for our child to relax into sleep. So this is oftentimes where we hear of the witching hour, where our children are just awake for these long periods of time and they're upset and kind of cranky and crying. And that's likely because they're overtired and they weren't able to get to sleep soon enough. Once your child reaches that 3-month mark and up to about 5 months, their awake time changes so they can tolerate longer awake periods. So a good awake time cheat sheet for that would be, or awake time period would be 1 hour, 1.5 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes. So when they're at the 3-month mark, you're going to focus more on that 1.5 hours. Whereas by the 5-month mark, you're going to be closer to that 2 hours and 15 minutes. And awake time gets longer as the day goes on too. So generally the shortest awake period happens at the beginning of the day and the longest awake period happens before bedtime. So that's a good range, that 1.5 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's a good range to follow for your child. We also want to do something else along with following their awake time, which would be following their tired cues. So if your child has a 7-mile stare, or if they're rubbing their eyes, or you notice their eyebrows are getting red, or they're getting red rimmed eyes, or they're yawning, or starting to get really whiny or fussy, these are all tired cues. So we want to use a combination of watching their tired cues, but also respecting their awake windows. I once worked with a client who put her child down as soon as he would start self-soothing. So as soon as he started thumb sucking, she would immediately put him down for a nap. But the thing is sometimes we self-soothe or do things throughout the day. I know I yawn throughout the day sometimes, and it doesn't mean I'm immediately ready for a nap. So that's why it's important to use those two hand in hand. So following the awake time chart and also following the tired cues to figure out when your child should go down for a nap. Around the 6-month mark, things really change. Your baby is likely dropping down to 2 naps a day, and they can tolerate a lot more awake time. So in between the 6 and 8-month mark, the awake time range would be from 2.5 hours to 3 hours and 15 minutes. So by 8 months old, your child should be able to tolerate that 3 hours and 15 minutes of awake time at the end of the day. Whereas a new 6-month-old might only be able to tolerate 2.5 hours. But as time goes on, their awake time will change and it will get longer. So following that range will be important to make sure that your child is staying awake enough so that they can nap well throughout the day. In between 9 and 12 months, you're starting to get these longer stretches as your child is really normalizing on that 2-nap schedule. And closer to 12 months, they're getting ready to transition to 1 nap. So things are changing a lot. In between 9 to 12 months, a good range for awake time is anywhere from 3 hours to 3 hours and 45 minutes. So some babies really can tolerate a lot of awake time at the end of the day and even in the middle of the day. So it's important to notice if you put your child down for a nap and they're not falling asleep right away, then that means that they can tolerate some more awake time. We wouldn't jump to a huge awake time change, but by gradually doing it by 10 or 15 minutes, you'll be able to reach your desired awake time. In between 12 and 18 months is when the big one nap change happens. So this is when they go from napping twice a day to napping once a day, and they can tolerate a lot more awake time. So the awake time range for this age is anywhere from 3 hours and 45 minutes to 5 hours. So they can tolerate a lot. And generally, once your child's on one nap a day, they should definitely be able to tolerate 5 hours of awake time on either end of the nap. So when they first transition to the one nap a day, we won't expect them to have this long 5-hour awake period, but we will expect them to stay up a lot longer than they're used to before. So 4.5 hours would be the minimum. Between 18 months and 3 years, this is when we're starting to shorten the nap because it might start interfering with nighttime sleep. So a good awake time range for this age would be anywhere between 5 and 6 hours. So it's common for children to want to drop their nap in between 2.5 and 3.5 years old. Some rare children will keep their nap until they're 5 or 6 and they still sleep through the night. But if you notice that you're putting your child down for their nap and they're napping well, but then at nighttime's getting really delayed, or bedtime's getting delayed, and they're up for a long time, prolonging it, then that's a sign that it's possibly time to drop the nap, or at least cut back on the nap. So around age 2, 2.5, we want to look at them having only about an hour and a half to maybe even just 1 hour of nap time, because their sleep needs have changed. So it's super important to follow awake windows, but also follow tired cues to make sure that you maximize nap time and you get the best naps out of your baby. So thanks for following along today. I hope you learned something about awake times. I know that was something that was really confusing for me when I had my first, but when I had my second and when I really memorized this little cheat sheet, then things became a whole lot easier because I was able to schedule my day around the naps. So I will post the awake times below, and thank you so much for following. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss a video.